Hey, Matt.
Hey, Ryan.
I am trying to break your heart.
What?
And you should listen to this.
You should listen to this.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're back at it again.
We are.
It's a very familiar scene. Like, we recorded the Talking Heads album, like, right before we went to a concert. So, it's like...
And there's a pattern here.
Yeah, it's a deja vu. At least, like, you know, the weather outside's a little bit better, so...
It's a little bit, it's a little bit better. It's also a little colder, but it's at least,
yeah, it's a wee bit nipply.
A wee bit nipply. But hey, it's a good time to stay inside and talk about some freaking Wilco.
Yeah, man. So, this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the biggest album from... Wilco, called Yankee Hotel Foxtrot.
Yes.
Yeah. What does that mean?
I have no idea.
The only fan theory I heard, man, was, like, I don't know what the actual proper terminology, but it, like, you know, like, military, like, you know.
Yeah.
So the initials are YHF.
Uh-huh.
Like, a fan theory is speculating that, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot? Wow. I'm trying to break my own heart here. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, like, it stands for You Have Failed.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, for those of you who are like, what is a Wilco? Well, I don't know why you clicked onto this podcast, but I'm glad that you at least enjoy hearing us talk about bands and music and such. But
yeah,
Wilco, without going too much into it, they are I would like to call them. I don't want to say an indie rock band because that's just.
I would.
You would?
Yeah, I would.
I would maybe throw the label on them like alt country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But. Yeah, they're an old country band that has been going for a while now. This specific album that we're going to be talking about was released technically in 2002, but it was in the age of, like, internet leaks, so, like, technically it came out, like, late 2001.
Yeah.
Around, like, a little bit after, like, September 11th.
Yes.
Yeah, so the messages and the lyrical themes in this album with, like, you know, songs like Ashes of the American Flag,
yeah,
and, like, you know, imagery of, like, skyscrapers scraping. Mm-hmm. Like, the band was actually kind of pretty much freaked out, like, cause they recorded everything before 9/11. So for them,
then they just were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't release this right away?
Yeah, pretty much, man. I found that to be a very interesting tidbit, man.
That is very interesting, and I didn't think of it like that,
yeah.
Especially considering how a lot of it seems, I wouldn't say anti-patriotic, but it's definitely critical of American life in some aspects, but it also celebrates American life in others.
So, what is your history with this band before we dive into the record?
I know of them. I know they exist. I knew this album existed, and that's it.
Mine is maybe a hair more.
Okay.
I was familiar with the opening track off this album.
Okay.
And I've listened to Jesus Etc. before. And I've listened to maybe one other Wilco album, and I think I've listened to this specific album before, but never with the intent of listening in and dissecting it and putting it on repeat.
Gotcha.
So if your knowledge of Wilco is at a 1 right now, consider mine to be a 2.
Okay.
I at least recognize, hey, this is a Wilco.
I will say, I knew only of this album before I got here today.
Yeah.
A little peek behind the curtain. And it was interesting to see the live performance that you had on of them, which is a lot more closer to what you're describing, alt country, because what it revealed to me very quickly is how different their live sound is compared to what the sound is on this record.
Yeah, the sound on this record, the production elements, it's kind of muted, eh?
It's a little muted, and it's also very dense, I would say is the word I would use, dense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surprised that you wouldn't refer to this as indie rock, because I feel there's a lot of elements in. I guess indie rock is a little too cliche of a term. I would probably even say it's closer to art rock in a sense too.
I can see that, man. Like, the only reason why I did not say that it was indie rock, because it's, I don't know, like, it's like calling every pop punk band that broke whenever we were growing up and going through high school like an emo band.
Yes, but on that note, that you made me bring up a good point.
Yeah.
Or you're going to make me bring up a good point. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So, one thing you have to consider in context.
Yeah.
This album was released, like you said, in 2002.
Yeah.
Now, what was popular in rock around this time?
If I'm not mistaken, I would say probably mainly indie rock with a blend of, like, you know, garage rock revival with, like, the White Stripes and the Hives and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And then, like, you know, maybe just indie rock as a whole.
You're forgetting the other one.
What?
The dastardly bastard known as nu metal.
Oh, yeah. I think I just, you know, maybe
tune that out.
Maybe carve that part of my brain out.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair, but I think that does add context to what this album did at the time of its release. And I think, not to detract from the album at all,
yeah,
but I think that may have given it a little bit of a boost.
Yeah.
Because people who have been listening to the likes of Limp Bizkit and you know, bands, even to an extent like Linkin Park, in a sense, who was better,
yeah,
but it was still very much in the sense of going to the extreme of, you know, hardcore and, you know, we're going to mix metal with rap and it's going to sound atonal, you know, and we like Korn. And if you like any of those bands, no offense. But at the same time, those who did not like those bands and were pining for the days where rock had a little bit more of a touch of intellect to it or artsiness, for them this album had to have been a revelation. Like, oh, they can make albums like this.
That's an excellent, like, you know, way to introduce the album, man. You want to get into it?
Let's get into it.
So, the opening track, I Am Trying to Break Your Heart. I'm going to let Matt lead this one off, because I'm curious to hear what he has to say about this song.
I have to say, this particular song is an interesting album opener.
Yeah.
It's very... I was talking about how the sound of this album is dense, and this is very much right out of the gate the case.
Yeah.
My first thought listening to this is like, oh, these guys have listened to some art rock in their past. They've listened to, like, the White Album. They've probably listened to, like, Dark Side of the Moon. And I know those are cliche to say, but at the same time, for 2002, that's pretty much all you had. Mm-hmm. And nobody was making music like that at the time.
Yeah.
Another thing I noticed is the vocal production on this track is quite muffled.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, towards, like, the latter part of the album, man, like, that actually kind of hurts the album a little bit. And, like, just my feelings about the album.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll pinpoint the exact songs that I'm talking about. The only muffled part that I can really think about that really gets a little rough is, like, at the very end, the last verse. But, yeah, personally, I don't have any problems with the vocal production on this one.
I will say that at first I was kind of, like, wanting a little bit more, but on second listen, because I've listened to this album twice, on second listen, I understood at least the context of which they were going for, at least the aesthetic that they were going for, because again, this was released at a time when nobody was doing this, and I think to have those muffled vocals, and certainly in a song that talks about heartbreak and feeling confused, I think is a nice touch. Now, I agree with you that on other tracks, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. It does not work, and we'll get to that. But I think on this track, it does add ambiance to it, even if I can't really understand what he's saying.
So, for those of you who are wanting to know, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be like, tell me what Jeff Tweedy's talking about.
There's a few lines I do remember.
Yeah. The way that I've been, reviewing reviewing albums that we're talking about, man, mm-hmm. is I literally put on headphones, dissect, comb through, section by section. And, the way that you do it is, it places the dynamics. It makes us, an excellent, team here. Because, when you really think about it, that's how people listen to music. It's either you dissect it, or you just listen to it.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, you did an excellent way to You did an excellent way to introduce the song of the album. Wow, my brain's a little scattered.
Well, it's the song that introduces the album, so
true.
You're not too far off.
But it is kind of a weird freeform opening with the band, mm-hmm. and I do love the scattered drum part, how it builds. The first verse, there's a line called. It goes I am an American aquarium drinker.
Huh?
So,
beg pardon?
That line is referencing that it's essentially giving a nod to alcoholism. I can drink so much that I can literally drink an aquarium.
Gotcha.
And the next line is, I am an assassin driving down the avenue. He's drunk driving at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, the first, elements that are introduced are just this, I'm essentially kind of a broken man, and I'm a drunk who drinks, aquariums worth of Bud Light. Not a sponsor.
Right.
And even openly admitting to, drunk driving in America,
wow.
The way that I kind of took, that opening, I mean, we're all adults here. We've all have had hangovers before.
Yes, we have.
This is Jeff Tweedy waking up from a hangover. He, starts slumbering out and, just starts shaking things loose from the night before. And then whenever he gets into his first verse, mm-hmm. That's him getting a stream of consciousness. What's your thoughts on that?
That's an interesting theory.
Yeah,
it's an interesting theory, and it definitely adds to the theory that I have about this album, mm-hmm. which we'll kind of get into later on down the line.
Yeah,
because I don't think this album really tells a story, but I feel like there is a linear progression of thought and feeling that pervades the album. It does. It plays out like a story, but it doesn't really explain itself like a story. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I get that, man. It's not as straightforward as American Idiot by Green Day or Tommy's The Who,
right? Or For the First Time, for that matter.
Yeah, true. What a good record, man.
I know. If you haven't listened, check that episode out.
So, second verse that he's talking about, if I remember the lyric correctly, he's talking about, hey, let's forget about all the tongue-tied lightning. And the verse is basically about, hey, let's just forget about the arguments and let's just make love. So, and then from there, the piano work between the second and the third verse, it's pretty nice. You remember that part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of piano on this album.
Oh, yeah. It adds there's a lot of good instrumentation that I can really dig.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And then the third verse, let me actually do some justice here and try to pick up the lyrics.
Or are we getting the football line yet? That's the one that was what is he talking about?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
And for those of you who are like, Ryan, please stop deep diving every single lyric. This is the only song out of the album that I'm gonna, like, you know, immensely deep dive the lyrics, because there's a lot of lyrics in this opening song. Yeah. So the third verse is, I want to glide through those brown eyes dreaming. And there's a couple other spots. It's talking about, like, how he wants to get into his lover's mind and figure out what her hopes and dreams are.
Yeah.
And, like, from here, like, I love how, and this gives way to my theory about this is him waking up from a hangover, because things start, as the song progresses, it gets more tighter and tighter with the drums and the instrumentation. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth verse, I think this is the one that you're talking about with, like, football. Let me see here. Yeah. So the line is, take off your Band-Aid because I don't believe in touchdowns.
Yeah.
So,
would you like to deep dive that a little bit? Because I have no idea what that means.
So, if I can remember correctly, the way that I thought about that specific lyric is just, this is about relationships and not keeping score and just being open. So take off your Band-Aid. So leave open any like any wounds, like, you know, leave them open for, like, you know, the world to see. And because I don't believe in touchdowns.
So don't wear your scars like a victory.
Yeah, and don't, like Jeff Tweedy, in regards to love, doesn't believe in keeping score.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. Excellent lyric, man.
Yeah.
And then fifth verse goes on about how he always thought if, like, he held her tightly, that she'd love him like she did back then. So just trying to hold on to, like, you know, trying to make things work that aren't clearly working.
And this is the part of the song where things started becoming a little bit more clear for me as to what this song's about and the feeling that he is transcribing. He feels like and this is the kind of stuff too, which, you know, going back to the comparisons with, like, nu metal and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff, whether it was nu metal or even the pop scene at the time or the rap game at the time, all of it was very confidently cocky. A lot of it was guys saying, you know, I'm here, I'm cool, awesome.
Yeah.
And really, again, I think Linkin Park was the only band at that time in that category that had any sort of regret about what it was, you know, presenting itself as. Mm-hmm. Like, it was presenting itself as, you know, sad and frustrated, but at least it was clearly frustrated. This isn't clear at all.
Man.
Like, this is very poetic. This is very tongue-in-cheek. And again, it does require a lot of introspection as to figure out what the hell he's saying, but that's the point. Because when you're dealing with breakup and regret on that level, particularly one that's been drowned in alcohol or whatever substances that he may be referring to, it's going to feel confusing. It's going to feel real confusing. You're going to have a lot of arguments with yourself and going back to the past. So, yeah, I think the mood aesthetically on this track is conveyed perfectly in that way. That being said, I think the track's fine, but it's not one I would, like, give repeated listens to, because it's just a little bit, again, with the vocals being where they are and just the general flow being a little
yeah. I can understand that. It's like, it's not everybody's warm bowl of soup, so.
No, it's not. It's not.
But
I will say, at least from a subjective basis, not my favorite, but from an objective basis, I think it does open the album very well.
Yeah. And just wrapping up the last little parts of the song here.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are like, what's that noise in the background? My dog is, like, right next to me on the couch. You might have heard, like, a moan or anything like that.
Or the jingling of...
Yeah. So... Yeah. So after the fifth verse that I discussed, this is where the lyric comes on, I am trying to break your heart. And I love how, like, you know, the drums drop out, and it's just like, you know, it focuses in on that lyric. And the whole "I am trying to break your heart" could be a combination of Jeff Tweedy realizing what he's doing to his partner at the time by trying to force her into the relationship, and that's the theory that I'm sticking with.
Okay.
And
because I have an alternate theory, actually.
What's that theory?
About the entire song and that line in particular.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that the opening lines are about him admitting to drinking and driving.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me wants to think that this is actually taking place while that is happening.
Oh, okay.
That he is trying to, he's just getting off of a breakup.
Yeah.
And he's just letting it all loose. He's not giving a single damn about anything.
Yeah.
And he is just fighting with himself, fighting with, looking at both sides from his own perspective, which is weird, but trust me. And this is him trying to break her heart. Like he might do something very brash here, in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That could be that's a very valid theory, man. Like, man, what a good opening song, man.
It's a good opening song. Again, would I listen to it repeatedly? No, but for what it is on the album, it does exactly what it needs to do.
All right. So, wrapping it up, because I feel like we spent, 15, 20 minutes on this song already?
Something like that.
Yeah, but to be fair, the song's 10 minutes long.
Is it? It's about, I think it's about 7, but still.
Rounding up, man. 7 or 10.
7 or 10.
Yeah.
This day and age.
So, after this is where, the production elements and just the last verse that is a complete train of thought, it almost seems like he's drowning and he's not as forefront with the vocals. And so the first verse is Jeff Tweedy talking about, I'm an American aquarium drinker. In this last verse, he's talking about drinking from Dixie cups. So I love that clever nod. I'm not exactly sure what that means. It might be him trying to, admitting that he's trying to get better and not, trying to, harm himself nearly as much.
Right.
But he still talks about being an assassin driving down the avenue. So maybe it could be a dual element of hey, I'm trying to get better, but I know who I am.
Right.
Yeah.
That's solid.
And at the very end, it's just a very thick outro with dense instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing, the last line being that you can hear in the song is, I'm the man who loves you. And that's a wink wink, nudge nudge to the rest of the album, because there's one particular song that is literally called that. So
yeah.
Alright. So that is the end of I'm Trying to Break Your Heart. We only spent maybe around 15 minutes on that.
Yeah, just 15 minutes.
Yeah.
No big deal.
But to be fair, there was a lot to go over there.
So moving on to the second song on the album, which is Camera.
Alright.
Now this song is very different.
Completely different. Well, maybe not completely different, but if I'm Trying to Break Your Heart is a T-bone steak, this is a cheeseburger.
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say it's a particularly good cheeseburger, though.
Oh.
So here's the thing. I don't think the track is bad. I don't think it's unlistenable.
Yeah.
I do like it's tough because on the one hand, I do think there's a nice contrast between the simplicity of the backing track here and what we heard on I Am Trying to Break Your Heart.
Mm-hmm.
But we were talking about how the confused vocals mixed with the dense sound makes sense. Here the vocals sound pretty much the same, but it's presented with this plain sort of happy-go-lucky, bright sort of back to it.
Yeah.
And it kind of just doesn't work for me. It sounds nice,
but
it also sounds like something's wrong with the microphone. Like, it made more sense whenever it was done with all this murkiness beneath it. But when it's presented as... I mean, maybe there was a point to have it contrast on purpose. Just to present... and even then, if we're talking about this album as a story, maybe this is just him having a recollection from the last song and trying to think happier thoughts. So it might work aesthetically like that, but on its own, again, it just feels like contrasting too much.
There's one very particular transition that I'll point out whenever it happens in terms of like the album and track flow that I can 100% understand your feelings for, that you're having between like this song and the last song. It's okay, you're not allowed to like it as a standalone track. Because I feel like you were trying to justify your hatred at that.
I don't hate it, but I would probably say it doesn't do anything for me. It feels, again, it's presented as sort of this conventional contrast to the unconventional first track.
Yeah.
But when you do that, the unconventional of the vocal sound is... It just sounds amateurish. It just sounds, like something. And again, it doesn't. He didn't have to do this. Obviously, they made this record. It was very successful. So what do I know?
Yeah.
But for me personally, as a listener, again, it just feels a little off.
Keep in mind, like I don't believe "Camera" is like a notable track from them.
Right.
Like pinpointing it, like from the research I was able to do, because I feel like throughout like all of our episodes so far, this has been the one I've done the most research for. I even listened to a podcast about this album.
Oh my!
I know, like holy cow!
You're cheating on us.
But no, completely see your points on it. I would say I actually like the song.
Okay.
Like, even like as a nice standalone song, like, it's a nice straightforward song. It knows what it's doing. And, like, it does do some elements pretty basically. And there's, like, parts where, like, there's, like, a nice instrumental break after the second verse. And, like, it's funny, like, when we went to that Foxtrot concert, you were like, man, I hope we have an episode soon where we disagree.
And here we are.
This might be the episode.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But,
I think we disagree on this track more than anything else, but we'll see.
Yeah. I feel like it is a nice change of pace from the thickness of the last song.
I agree that it feels like a nice change of pace.
Yeah.
But it just, again, because it doesn't fully change the pace, and I don't know. I might be reading way too much into the production on here, but it does just, again, it feels like the vocals are too murky for this bright contrast.
Yeah. But even, like, reading it too much into the production, that's who you are as a person. You literally are a radio host. So that's
I was a radio host.
Yeah. But I mean, like, this is your bread and butter. Like,
yeah.
So, like, that's what you gravitate towards. So.
That's fair. That's fair.
So, and the overall, like, themes about the song are basically about, like, trying to find truth in the world in an honest way and looking through a lens of a camera, like, trying to see the truth.
Yeah.
And then just end up just smashing the camera, like, just trying to find your own way. Like, in terms of, like, an amazing deep dive compared to, like, how I did with I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, there's not much there.
There really isn't, and I'm kind of glad that you say that, because the one final point I'll make about the vocals is that if they were just murky, I probably wouldn't mind so much, because that's like, oh, that's an aesthetic choice. Yeah. But I cannot understand, like, if you're listening to this on a computer and you have the lyrics in front of you, which I'm sure you probably did while you were listening to the album. Yeah. I was listening to it while I was driving. And so I just decided, okay, when I listen to an album, a lot of times I won't look at the lyrics while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'll just take it in as it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll be able to understand what the guy or the girl or whoever is singing or playing and just be like, oh, okay, so that's what they're talking about. But I just couldn't do that with this track. It's one thing to be murky, but it's another for me to be incomprehensible, and I think that's what turned me off about the vocals the most.
Okay, yeah, I could definitely go with that. I might do like a experiment after we like in the next couple days, like actually listen to a Wilco album, but don't have the lyrics in front of me.
All right.
Like not even like a modern Wilco album. Like maybe do like the next one after this, or the one before, just to see if just to see if my opinion would change a little bit.
Gotcha.
But are you ready to move on to Radio Cure?
Yes.
All right. So Radio Cure, I would say out of the 3 songs so far, this is my least favorite.
It's not high up for me either.
Yeah.
Although it is fascinating for this reason. We were talking about how the last track was very bright underneath, but I was saying that the vocals were incomprehensible. This is the contrast of that, because now the vocals are a lot clearer on this song, but the production goes right back to being very dense and almost disorganized, which. I wouldn't say maybe not disorganized, but very unstructured. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. When I initially was notating the crap out of this song, you're talking about the just the overall aspects of the song. I would say out of the whole album, this is probably my least favorite song. And it's because...
Out of the opening songs or on the album as a whole?
Even, expanding it throughout the whole album, this is my least favorite. And it's basically because, I forget what the song was off the Neil Young album that we just reviewed in our last episode that I didn't really care for.
Is it the title track, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere?
No.
No, it was, there's 7 songs. Round and Round?
Round and Round, yeah.
Yeah.
This, my thoughts about Round and Round are basically what I feel about this. Yes, there's parts towards the end where, it kind of changes up and it makes it a little nicer. But this song just drags for the first little bit, man.
Yeah.
There's a song later on where it's another slower song, but it does it much better, and it doesn't drag.
Right.
So, but up until the point that he's talking about distance has no way of making love understandable, I was just bored out of my mind, man. No slam to Jeff Tweedy or anything like that, but that first part does not carry it at all, man.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, I was probably more bored by this track than anything.
Yeah.
And I was starting to... On my first listen, this is the part where I started to have doubts about whether I was going to like this album as a whole or not. Mm-hmm. Because in the first 3 tracks, I was thinking, okay, vocals are a little murky, but it's kind of artsy. I get it. Okay, second one's got murky vocals, but it's trying to be bright. I don't get it. And then this one just kind of, goes back into the murk. And, it's respectable, but it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah. Ready to move on?
Yes.
War on War.
Now this one.
War on War. War on War. Oh, man. So, what are your thoughts about this song, man?
I like it, actually.
Okay.
I like this song. And again, I think this is maybe where... This sounds aesthetically and sonically, to me, how Camera should have sounded.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like the vocals are a little brighter, and the track is just about as bright. And I understand lyrically it's not a masterpiece or very deep.
Yeah.
But it does what it needs to do. And yeah, I mean, it's a nice, simple little track, and I dig it.
You talk about how there's not a lyrical masterpiece and it's not too deep, but there's a lyric in there that is perhaps my favorite throughout the whole freaking album.
Yeah.
And the lyric is, "You have to learn how to die if you want to be alive."
Yeah.
And you, like, in I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, you were talking about, like, how Jeff Tweedy was just being very open and honest and, like, you know, not being very sure of himself. The idea of, like, you have to learn how to die if you want to be alive. It's basically saying, like, dude, you gotta learn how to make mistakes if you want to live. Like,
yeah, you have to learn how to hit rock bottom if you want to climb back out.
Yeah. So,
which I agree, and I do think that is a great line.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily one that's like, ooh, what's he saying? You know exactly what he's saying, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. And there's even moments, like, towards the later half of the album where Jeff Tweedy pulls back on, like, you know, the mysticism and the artistic elements of, like, his lyricism. Yeah. And it's super straightforward, and he nails it, dude.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about War on War. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward song. It's a better improved version of Camera, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like at first when I heard War on War, War on War, I'm like, okay, come on, I get it. But, like, even through repeated listens, the song grew on me.
Yeah.
And, yeah, like, the band just does an excellent job jamming with the whole song and just the effects of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, again, so far I would say I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, then War on War are my two top songs out of this album.
Okay. I'll probably say the same.
Up until this point.
Up until this point, yeah.
So, ready to move on to the nice warm bowl of soup that is Jesus, etc.
Well, see, here's the thing. I agree. I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's quite like if this song had come on after Radio Cure, it might be closer to a warm bowl of soup, similar to Bound 2 from our Yeezus review.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the progression, at least from where it started with I Am Trying to Break Your Heart up to now, has been a bit more of a gradual procession from darkness to brightness, back to darkness, and then trying to get back into the light. And this song does come out of the speakers as the clearest song on the album, production-wise, vocally. Maybe not necessarily lyrically, because it is a little bit more complicated than War on War, but it just sounds so beautiful, man.
It's so good, dude. Like, I knew about this song beforehand, but through repeated listens, like, it just... I don't know what it is. Like, it's just a very comforting song.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely love it. I'm curious to see, like, how the songs are going to progress in, like, in terms of, like, my favorite songs of all time.
Oh, wow.
Because I've been constantly, like, spinning it. It is a perfect track.
It really is. But what's weird about it is that in the context of this whole album, I would say it's probably the most out of place.
Okay.
Because we talked a lot about, it feels like there's a lot about heartbreak and trying to find yourself. I feel like this track, it's hard to say. We'll get there. We'll get there. But
it's hard to say, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Like when I say it's hard to say, like, it's easy to say, but I don't want to spoil anything.
Okay. Yeah. Well, whenever it comes out, just let me know.
Okay.
Okay. So, I did do a little bit of lyrical deep diving, not as hardcore as I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, so we're not going to spend another 15, 20 minutes talking about the song.
Okay.
But I mean, we easily can because it's so freaking good. But, song starts out, very nice strings, intro, like, shows off the instrumentation and, like, the compositional elements that Wilco does play with very well. And Tweedy's vocals are the strongest on the track, so far in the album, which, I mean, you already said, like, hey, this is, like, the strongest, like, that he's come across, like, the muffled vocals that you've pointed out so far, and that I would agree with, are not on this specific song.
No.
So the first verse is all about the narrator trying to comfort someone by relating to them. The lyrics that really stand out to me are, Jesus, don't cry, you can rely on me, you're right about the stars, each one is a setting sun. And that's basically saying, like, you know, hey, all the dreams, like, they eventually go away. And I love, like, this might be one of my favorite love songs of all time, because it's basically the narrator being like, hey, don't cry. You can rely on me. I'm going to be here with you. I get it, man. I get it.
Yeah.
So, the chorus, the main, like, you know, punchiness of this song, it gives a little bit of a wink, nudge, nudge to, again, album was recorded before 9/11, but the chorus goes, tall buildings shake, voices escape singing sad, sad songs. Which somebody could read as like, oh, hey, he's talking about 9/11 in the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
The way that, if I try to remove that part of my brain out of there, tall buildings shake is talking about, like, you know, just people, like, you know, scraping up against each other. And the rest of the chorus goes, tune chords strung down your cheeks, bitter melodies turning your orbit around. I'm gonna lie, I'm not sure what that exactly means. And I'm the one who, like, deep dives everything.
Yeah.
But I like it, though. That chorus is very nice.
Right, and it's presented so wonderfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, this song repeats so much, but I love it.
Yeah.
Like, it has that Weekend effect of, I can't feel my face. Like, that song basically repeats, but it is such a banger.
The band that I kind of got from this song, and the vibe I got from this, it's sort of like an old Oasis song, like a Wonderwall, or maybe even a Don't Look Back in Anger.
Yeah.
It has a very, like, pop sheen to it.
Yeah.
A little melancholy, but at the same time, hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Don't Look Back in Anger is probably a very good comparable song to this. I would say, though, that this song is, you know, doesn't have the reek of, hey, these guys are trying to make millions of dollars.
True. So, wrapping up the song, though, third verse is, like, the crux of the song. So the narrator is saying that our love is everything, even though we are all burning suns, like, you know, burning suns, giving a, you know, wink, nudge, nudge to that first verse about, like, you know, shooting suns being, like, setting suns. Like, even though, like, we're burning suns, like, we're eventually all gonna die.
Yeah.
All that truly matters is the love that we give. And, like, when we talk about, like, you know, perfect love songs, being there for somebody, being like, hey, I know that life wasn't what, like, you know, you thought it was gonna be. And just being like, hey, I know that we are all gonna die someday, but all that matters is human connection and the love that we give. Dude, like, so freaking good! I cannot overstate how much I love this song.
Yeah.
And, like, even, go ahead.
I was going to say that the one lyric that it's an obvious comparison would be the end of the Beatles' Abbey Road on the end.
Yeah.
Where Paul McCartney says, and in the end, the love you make is equal to the love you take, or back. I got that backwards.
Yeah.
Do the old Willy Wonka flip and reverse it.
The love you take
is equal to the love you make. There we go. Now I got it. And honestly, this sounds more sincere than that, I think.
Yeah.
Because, again, with Paul McCartney, he was a master craftsman of pop.
Yeah.
So, in one sense, yes, he did have a lot of great lyrics that were introspective, but they weren't so introspective they were confusing.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't be like, okay, you know, you're making it a little too complicated, I can't dance to this.
Yeah.
Whereas here, none of that applies, so it's just a matter of just being as honest as you possibly can through song,
Yeah.
and there you go.
So, rounding out the song with the last lyric that that basically kind of repeats. So the lyrics go, voices whine, skyscrapers are scraping together, your voice is smoking, last cigarette is all you can get, turning your orbit around. And I'm one who doesn't smoke. Neither are you.
Correct.
But the way that I was able to determine that, like, you ever see, like, somebody smoking at nighttime on a porch by themselves?
Yeah.
It might be the equivalent of, like, hey, your last beer of the night, and you're basically, like, watching the TV by yourself, and, like, you maybe have had a hard life, but, like, just that solace that you can get, like, hey, everything's gonna be okay. And, like, that just warm feeling, dude. Like, holy cow, this song! I can, this is a song that John Mayer wishes that he could have written. I'm a fan of John Mayer, and Gravity's an awesome song, but this song blows us out of the water.
Oh, yeah. It's probably, I would say it's probably my favorite song on the album, easily.
Yeah.
Although not without competition, and we'll get there.
Okay. So the next song, you have anything else to say about Jesus?
No, I think it's just a matter of I'm gonna probably be listening to it a lot myself in the coming future.
Yeah. All right. So the next song is "Ashes of American Flags."
Again, they record this before 9/11.
And they're like, oops, my bad. I'm gonna let you lead off this one, because, like, in my head, this is a very huge parallel to Radio Cures in terms of, like, stylistic elements.
I could see that. It's definitely a little bit more scattered than Jesus, etc. It leans a little more towards Radio Cure in that regard.
Yeah.
But I will say that again, the vocals on here are as clear as they are in Jesus, etc. The lyrics are probably maybe not quite as poignant, but they're definitely as stated as they are in Jesus, etc. This one's more about being critical of American living, and I think it's solid. I think it's solidly presented. It does get a little dense toward the end of the track, where they start. I don't even call it soloing. I don't think there's a single legit solo on this album. Or there might be a couple.
I would disagree with that with "I'm the Man Who Loves You."
Okay, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
But not on this song.
Okay.
This one's more like it just sort of goes through the chord changes and, gets a little bit back into the murk. But it makes sense because it contextualizes the frustration that the protagonist of the song is having towards American lifestyles.
Yeah.
And I like it. I will say I liked it more the first time I listened to it than the second time, because I thought, okay, again, it does drag a little bit in the second half of the song. Like, it comes out swinging and then just kind of like goes off on a tangent musically and then comes back and is like, oh yeah, well, we were singing a song.
Yeah, I can agree with that, man. I would say, compared this to Radio Cure, I like this a little bit better.
Same.
But, like, the way I was able to, you said, like, this song is, like, somewhat critiquing, like, the American lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is just Jeff Tweedy just going through, like, an average American day. Like, the opening lyrics are talk about him taking money out of a cash machine, spending $3.67 on a Diet Cola and cigarettes. And hey, like, why are we listening to poets when nobody gives a hoot?
Yeah.
Like, it's a very apathetic approach to, like, life.
I wouldn't even say it's apathetic as much as it is cynical. It's more or less like, yeah, or I wouldn't even say cynical, more like condescending, I would say.
No, I think cynical would be a very appropriate label for it.
Yeah, because you can almost, like, if I were to read these lyrics aloud without having heard the tune before,
yeah,
like, I would just be like, oh, I guess I'll go out today and buy myself a Diet Coke and put some money in an ATM, I guess.
So,
which is kind of how this song plays out.
Yeah, and the refrain, the way that I was able to take away from the chorus and the refrain is the lyric goes, "All my lives are always wishes. I wish I would die if I could come back new." So basically, this might be just Jeff Tweedy talking about like, hey, all of my lives are just stuff that I wish that can happen, and wishing that he could die if he can come back and he just wanted to start over, man.
Yeah.
So I feel like that might take elements of like lyrical themes of Camera and just make it into like a slower, like if Camera and Radio Cure had a baby,
It'd
like
be the song.
it would be the song.
Well, if that's the case, then at least the parents did a good job of raising the child to a better world, I suppose.
Yeah. So, I mean, other than it just being an open song, I can get behind it. Not one of my favorites off the album, which is interesting to say because I feel like the big songs off of this album are "I'm Trying to Break Your Heart," Jesus, etc., "Ashes of American Flags," and I feel in War and War. Like those are the big songs. If people were to, if we're talking about like heavyweight contenders, like those are the big songs off the album.
Gotcha.
So, but you have anything else to talk about? Ashes of American Flags?
Not really. I think that's pretty much. I agree with what you said. It sounds big, but it's not super big.
I can get behind that. All right, heavy metal drummer.
Heavy metal drummer.
Heavy metal drummer.
I'll let you start this one.
So, you were talking about like how you did not care for the whiplash of just track flow between "I'm Trying to Break Your Heart" and Camera.
Yeah.
I didn't, like, at first listen of, like, deep dive in this album, I did not care about the whiplash between Ashes of American Flags and Heavy Metal Drummer.
Really?
Because it went from, like, hey, super, like, dense and literally, like, what you were talking about to, like, oh, completely 180.
Yeah.
It wasn't until like I listened into like the next couple tracks off the album that I'm like, oh, they're just changing directions for the next several songs. So
right, and I think that's where I in context, like, well, I will say the first time I listened to it, like, I didn't even have any thoughts of regret or rancor. I was just like, cool, this is upbeat. I like this.
Yeah.
And it definitely is a bit of whiplash. I wouldn't say it's as much whiplash though, because at least for as off-putting and dark as Ashes of American Flags was, at least it was a bit more structured than it was structured and not as murky.
Yeah.
Like, it was still a little bit of murk in there, but it wasn't as murky as "I Am Trying to Break Your Heart."
Yeah.
So I think coming out of this into Heavy Metal Drummer wasn't so much of a whiplash. That being said, though, I would say this track is probably very much in the top 4 for me on this album.
Okay.
Because we've talked before, particularly with Black Country New Road, about the idea of presenting, songs presenting an image. Like, whenever someone sings it, you can imagine what they're going through.
Yeah.
This song does that for me.
Okay.
Like, I can imagine this guy hanging out with, and granted, I'm a little biased because I sort of did this one summer, hanging out with friends and,
You fell in love. You fell in love with the drummer.
I did not fall in love with the drummer, but I envision, because I went to a few metal shows when I was before my senior year of high school, and it was during the summer, and then it sort of invoked memories of that, just sort of this carefree atmosphere, and I do love also the thematic ironies here of how this song is very upbeat and almost poppy and almost not techno bass, but very electronic sounding.
Yeah.
Talking about heavy metal, which is very much not that.
Yeah.
Like a song that goes ba 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 ba. Talking about, bands that go. I love that irony. I love it.
I'm gonna break your heart.
Uh-oh. This is your least favorite song on the album, isn't it?
No, Radio Cure is still my least favorite. Like, this is my second to least favorite.
Okay.
So, it's in my bottom 2.
Okay.
Again, not as, like, when I talk about, like, not liking the song, like, for those of you who have listened to our Kanye West episode, which, little inside baseball, it drops tomorrow, but this is Ryan talking maybe, like, 3 to 4 weeks in the future, so... But yeah, the episode actually drops tomorrow from the date of, like, us recording this.
Yes.
I don't even know why I mentioned that, man. It's like...
It's a nice little nugget for people to be like, oh, so that's what they... Oh.
Yeah.
If they care.
Yeah. It's almost like whenever I listen to, like, fantasy hockey podcasts and go talk about games that have already been finished. So, like, that they are watching at the time.
Yeah.
Anywho... It's... when I talk about, like, heavy metal drummer, like... I don't have a visceral reaction to it compared to, like, how I had a reaction to I'm in it. Right. Like, my brain does not short circuit. It just, this song's not for me. And, like, the whole chorus of, like, fell in love with the drummer, like, it doesn't do it for me. Like,
I get that.
Yeah. And, like, it just, I feel like this song, this is, for those of you who listen to our Talking Heads episode, this is the swamp.
Ooh.
Where I'm like,
ooh.
If this was done by any other band, I would be okay with. Even if this was like Wilco in like a different album setting, like I can get behind, but it's just like, I'm even questioning at some points, is this actually Wilco that I'm listening to?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. See, I will disagree with you on that. I know what you mean, but I will disagree with you on this basis.
Yeah.
And I will admit it's basically the basis I had going to this. Because, again, I really didn't know anything about Wilco going into this, other than they were an indie rock band, and this was an album released in 2002.
Yeah.
But because of that, because I thought to myself, okay, this is early indie rock, like, indie rock would blow up a little later down the decade.
Yeah.
Like towards the end of the aughts and into the 10s.
Yeah.
So my thought, and from what I heard too, like a lot of this album was very much Wilco basically throwing in like everything but the kitchen sink, trying something new to like get away from what they'd been doing.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if they try a bunch of different stuff on here, expect that. Expect them to sort of go all over the place, and if they make weird changes, because they'd been doing this earlier on in the album too, like without that context.
Okay.
So I'm not, by this point I wasn't as shaken by the whiplash, and again the transition for me, and I understand that definitely does sound more poppy than anything else on this album, perhaps anything in their careers.
Yeah.
But again, for me personally, I like it.
If you compare like our listening styles together, like I didn't mind the transition between "I'm Trying to Break Your Heart" and "Camera."
Yeah.
And it's because I looked into like I zeroed in on the lyrics and tried to get some meaning off of that, and compare this to like what we're the transition that we're currently talking about, how the production, like not the production elements, but like just the overall sound of it, and the overall feeling of how like it makes you feel.
Yeah,
that's something that you really gravitated towards. Like I was just like, oh, she fell in love with the drummer. She fell in love with the drummer. Like I'm like, not for me, man. So
that's fair.
So if anybody's taken away from anything about this podcast, like yes, me and Matt are disagreeing right now, but it's because we're coming from two different standpoints.
Right, and that's. Yeah.
If he, basically said that he was into "I'm In It" by Kanye West in our last one of our previous episodes, I would have been like, "Is your brain okay?"
Yeah, it's like, you need a hug?
So, are you ready to move on?
Yes.
Alright, so the next song is The Man Who Loves You.
Another good, possibly great track.
Yeah. One of my favorites off the album. So, and not too much in terms of lyrical depth, but this is where Jeff Tweedy really starts flexing his muscles as a good guitar player.
Oh yeah. This is the I would say this is the rockiest song on the album. It rocks the hardest.
Yeah.
And it's just a good, straightforward track. Simpler than the likes of Jesus, etc. Probably about as simple as War on War.
Yeah.
It just. I will say the one thing, and this is what I've been trying to avoid spoiling. So when I was talking about how Jesus, etc., sort of divvied away from what the album was about, the first few songs it felt were about heartbreak and confusion.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the songs in the middle were a bit more focused, and they were talking about things like politics and religion, or at the very least they were inferring them.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, starting with Heavy Metal Drummer, and definitely more so on this track, it sort of goes back to the concept of love and the concept of reality, or at least trying to find love or being in love.
Yeah.
So it feels like, again, the other stuff deviates from that, and I'm not sure if that breaks up the flow of the album, or if, again, like I said before, this is just a band putting out what it just wants to, and it just happened to fall like this.
I can get behind that, man. I can get behind it. You can definitely tell, there's sections of this album where, hey, this is the first section, here's the different theme, and here's the different theme. Because even, the last two songs, Poor Places and Reservations, they kind of, coincide with a certain kind of feeling.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this song, I'm the Man Who Loves You, it's basically the narrator is saying hey, I tried to put pen to paper writing you a love letter, but I'd rather just take you by the hand and show you that I'm the man who loves you.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. Other than that, it really it's more of a jam session between the instrumentation of the guitars and the horn lines, dude. And at the very end, that this is Jeff Tweedy being hey, I can guitar solo.
Right. I can rock with the best of them. It's not all sadness and overdubs.
So, moving on. Yeah. No disrespect to that song. Fantastic song. I feel again, another big song off the album. I'm the Man Who Loves You, Ashes of the American Flags,
Jesus, etc.
I'm Trying to Break Your Heart.
Yeah.
Those are the big heavyweight songs.
Those would be the songs that would probably be released as singles.
Yeah. I'm curious to see if they actually were ever released as
singles. I would severely doubt it. Because the other thing is, this album was released on a label called None Such Records.
Yeah.
Which I think was an indie label.
Yeah.
So it was probably not the intent to release singles from this, but I don't know. We'll look that up after the fact.
Man. So, Pot, Kettle, Black. Pot, kettle, black. So, sorry about that. Do not edit that out, Matt.
All right, that's fine.
So, song it starts off just riding the high of that last track, and how it basically ended with a jam session. This song basically talks about Jeff Tweedy looking introspective, realizing, hey, I have faults within myself. Why aren't other people seeing faults in themselves? So I'm never going to be the one to call the kettle black. Yeah,
interesting.
What are your thoughts on this song?
I thought it was okay. I will say, as far as the back end of this album, this really didn't stand out to me as much.
Yeah.
Again, not that it's bad. It just sort of. It's there, and like you say, it rides that high. It starts to make that transition back from this feeling of love and feeling of seeking romance back towards It goes from everything's fine, everything's awesome to is it fine? Is it awesome?
Yeah.
And I think this track is more or less an effective way of transitioning into what would be the last couple of tracks on this album.
Yeah. So, are you ready to move on to Poor Places?
Yes.
So, I gotta know. What are your thoughts on this song?
On this song, I think it does a nice job harkening back to the thoughts and feelings of the first track on the album. Mm-hmm. And I think, in a sense, it is... again, we just watched Sleepaway Camp for the first time in a long time the other night.
Awesome movie, 10 out of 10.
No notes. And without spoiling too much, at the start of the movie, you're introduced to a world that is not fully understood until you've watched the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
In a sense, this is reaching the climax of the love section of the album, where Mr. Tweedy is basically starting to realize and have doubts, or just going through thoughts that are confusing, and he's unsure of himself, he's unsure of his relationship, and if that's not what the lyrics are directly, on a sonic level, on a production level, that's definitely what it is.
Gotta be honest with you, like, I in terms of, like, lyrical themes off of here, sorry, wow, that pizza's coming up. Curious to see how much you're going to include in the post-edit here.
Oh, we'll find out.
But, no, I just feel that the lyrics are a bit scatterbrained, but they do feature a focus on loss and longing. Not entirely, like, maybe one of my favorites off of the album so far, but I would say not a bad way to, like, start the ending of the album.
No.
Yeah. But, again, not much I can really say about it other than that. Like, there are specific lyrics that I really like. And the lyric goes, I know this isn't what you were wanting me to say. Oh, wait, no, that's Hidden Reservation. Sorry, I'm getting my notes mixed up here. But no, the lyric is, his bandage is wrapped too tight, his fangs have been pulled, and I just really want to see you tonight. It might be just really about, like, hey, like, the aggressiveness and, like, the hunger and, like, the danger that this person's had.
Yeah.
Like, they've just been taken away, and he just really wants to see his significant other. Yeah.
Right. I will go a little bit further, though, because I won't... This is the closest I'm going to do a deep dive on this album. You mentioned that chorus. It switches later on the song.
Yeah.
Where you talk about his hand, his bandages are wrapped too tight, his fangs have been removed. He switches that to I towards the end of the song.
Okay.
So... it could be interpreted as he's fighting with himself, and he's fighting with his own demons, and he might be fighting with another persona within him.
Yeah.
And he sees his significant other as a source of reality, comfort, stability.
Yeah. I can get behind that, man. I can get behind that.
Yeah, and that's why I think this does sort of place a nice transition between the end of the album and the start of the album, if you want to loop it around.
Yeah.
And the couple songs before, which were more about love and a feeling of freshness and hope. And hope springs eternal, in a sense.
Yeah. And at the very end of this song here, this is where you get the name drop of the album.
Yeah.
The radio sample of, like, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, and... I don't know, I like the ending of the song, how, like, that just kind of, like, culminates, and, like, it's just a very chaotic end to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, the theory that you stated at the top about Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, YHF, you have failed, does kind of make a little sense here.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's his realization of, you have failed. You have failed in this relationship. You have failed in making yourself happy and your significant other happy.
Man. Ready to move on to the last track?
Let's do it.
Reservations. So this is up there with Jesus, etc. being like a perfect love song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In terms of, like, it being super straightforward. There's not an ounce of lyrical deep diving that you can do here. Yeah. I don't know if that's how you feel, but like, with lyrics of how can I convince you it's me I don't like, and not be so indifferent to the look in your eyes. Like, yeah. What's your thoughts, dude?
Again, I just think I didn't catch those on the first listen. I gotta be honest with you, I didn't catch them on the second listen.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, this is progressing or regressing, if you want to say it, back towards the murk. So the overall feeling by the end of this album is just, okay, this guy is reeling. So, and because you are already used to what he was like at the beginning with I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, it feels like he's going back to that. And depending on your outlook of really your own philosophy, you know, if you hear that murk, you're thinking, okay, maybe I don't want to go back to that, so I'm just going to let this track pass by. Which, to be honest, I kind of did. I'll probably have to go back and listen to it, or at the very least look up the lyrics and be like, oh, yeah, that's really cool. But aesthetically, I do think it's a very solid album closer that does make everything seem full circle and present the climax of that back end of the album that makes the rest of the album, particularly the first part of the album, come more into focus.
And how the song ends, like it's another long song. Like I think it's like 7 or 8 minutes, not 10 minutes. I'm not gonna make that mistake again. However, like the lyrics are basically done. The majority of the instrumentation's done like halfway through. Like the rest is just like this spacey kind of outro. Not spacey, but like, you know, very spring and like, you know, very open-y kind of thing. It almost reminds me, and again, this might be a very poor reference point, but it's almost like the ending of the Barbie movie where Barbie like steps into this void with that older lady. You're getting what I'm saying, right? So
like you're just kind of wondering what on earth is going on. And you're just as confused as the protagonist is.
Well, not even that. Maybe like just this sense of like rebirth. So
okay, I could get that. But I wouldn't even call it rebirth. I would say it's more of a realization that this is where it is. There's no turning back now.
So, you got anything else to say about Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco before we give out our next album recommendations, rate it, and send us off?
I really don't have much more to say about that. I will say that overall, well, I'll get to that with my rating.
Okay. So I'll do my rating first.
Okay.
And then you'll do your rating.
And
then we can bounce back and forth between our next album recommendations. So when I initially did my deep dive of this, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Like, there's some excellent songs, but there are some songs that kind of drag in my honest estimation. I would be maybe willing to bump it up maybe just a hair to like maybe a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Just because of just some of the songs that I thought dragged. Like the first time I listened to like Ashes of the American Flag. Like, I thought that song dragged. Now, revisiting it, I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. And like, even at the end of I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, and like how he does that wink wink nudge nudge to I'm the Man Who Loves You. I didn't catch it the first time. So, but I'm going to stick with an 8 out of 10. I'm going to fully commit.
8 out of 10? Okay.
And like, there's excellent songs like I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, Jesus, etc., I'm the Man Who Loves You, and a couple other moments in here where the album really pops. There's a couple spots for me where it kind of does drag, like Radio Cures, and like
Heavy Metal Drummer.
Heavy Metal Drummer. It doesn't drag. It just
feels very off to you.
It's not my cup of tea. So, but overall, excellent album. Would I revisit it again in the future? Maybe. Am I going to do another? Will I explore more Wilco albums? kind of be honest with you, more than likely not. Like, I might be morbidly curious and like check out, not morbidly curious, but like just curious as a whole. Maybe check out like a couple other ones, but like, yeah.
Faintly curious.
Yeah. Would I ever see them live in concert? No, not really.
Right. That's fair. I would say my overall view of the album is that it's more good than bad, but it's more important than good. Because, again, this was one of the first modern indie rock albums that really went into the feeling of we're going to just do whatever the hell we want and put it on record and see what happens, which I give them a lot of credit for.
Yeah.
But after that, I would say that there's a few standout tracks, like Jesus, Etc. For me, but Heavy Metal Drummer, The Man That Loves You.
Yeah.
Which are good tracks that I'll probably listen to in rotation over the next couple months or so. Overall, I might come back to this album. I will say the live performance I saw beforehand was actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Wilco live. Overall, I would say 7.5 solid, with the 0.5 for importance purposes. Otherwise, it'd be a 7.
I got nervous. I thought you were going to rate it like below 7. I was going
to no.
You're going to try to break my heart.
No. Well, and see, this is the part of the series where we have to start watching ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, like, in my brain, I was like, how low could I go with this? I was like, you gave Yeezus a 6. This is better than Yeezus. Don't be an idiot.
Yeah, true. It's nice having like that reference point, man. I think I gave Yeezus a 5. So
you did. So you have a little bit more legroom than I do.
So, in terms of the next album recommendations,
based on this album, right?
Yeah, based on this album,
okay.
Not like our next episode, because it's Matt's turn to pick after this episode. I would say there is an album by Kings of Leon called Because of the Times that I jammed to a lot in college. Mm-hmm. That it kind of does have that elements of like, like the bare bones structure to it, and it does a little bit better job of like just presenting clear songs, and it's a much better album than this one.
Yeah.
So if you like this album, if you know about this album and you like it, and you don't know about the Kings of Leon album, jump to that one next.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Okay. I'm wrestling between a couple here. But I'm gonna go a little bit of a left turn here.
Okay.
I'm gonna go way back to the year of 1969.
Ooh.
And an album by the Velvet Underground.
Ooh.
Called The Velvet Underground. Is their self-titled not debut. I think it's their third album.
Yeah.
Not the Banana one. That was their first one with Nico. This one does not have Nico. It is a black and white cover, or grayscale, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of songs on there that reminded me, because I did think a couple times, this guy's voice, Jeff Tweedy, sounds a little bit like Lou Reed.
Yeah.
So I was reminded of songs like Beginning to See the Light, especially Pale Blue Eyes, which I thought of immediately when I listened to, I think it was Ashes of American Flags, where I had that thought. Mm-hmm. It is kind of get artsy, a little bit dense sonically. So I would say that would be my recommended album, The Velvet Underground.
Nice. Do you know I know we talked a little bit on and off air.
Yeah.
Any idea what the next episode's going to be? If not, it's cool. We can leave people in suspense.
Yeah, let's leave them in the dark.
Okay.
Because I still need a little bit of time to think about it. I will say my next album choice is going to be similar to your choice this time around, which is an album that neither of us have listened to. The only difference is I'm picking it.
Okay, there you go. So, any other thoughts about Wilco, this album, before we send us out here?
Just hey, if you like this episode and you liked any of our other ones, give us a like, tell a friend, share it on our socials.
Tell your neighbor's dog about us.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, just make sure that you rate this podcast on your podcasting platform of choice. It does do wonders of like how we can grow the show.
Yeah.
Give us a perfect rating because we are perfect people.
Or if you don't think that, feel free to leave a comment. Tell us what we can do better.
And If you have an idea for a future episode, feel free to hit us up at our email, ttheylisten@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. If you want to find us on any social media platforms, the handle is ttheylisten. Yeah, and if you guys, aren't able to find us on your podcasting platform of choice, feel free to hit us up and I'll try to see if I can add us to, the random platform that you're using. However, again, thanks for listening to this episode. And that's pretty much it.
That's it.
Don't try the ribs.
Don't try the ribs.
They might break your heart.